public and press will be asked to leave, but councillors, if not on the committee, are permitted to stay. So I see we've got a councillor other than here in attendance, and welcome along, councillor. Just before we start this evening's meeting, I would like to just make a couple of announcements. I'm not sure announcements, or comments, observations. And that is first to congratulate Steve Race on being elected as Exeter's MP here in Exeter. And also to congratulate David Reid, who's also representing the 3 wards in Exeter on his election to Exmouth and east of Exeter. In doing so, I would like Chief Executive and myself to write to them to congratulate them, and just to say to the committee, as we have done in the past, I have regular meetings with them to discuss about issues on how they can help us, and I think some of those discussions with one of the MPs will become more pertinent than perhaps they did before in view of the political makeup of the government. And I would like to actually now turn my attention to Ben Bradshaw, who has stepped down as being our, or he didn't stand again, as our MP here in Exeter for the last 27 years. And he has helped a lot of citizens in this city, done a lot of good work. Regardless, I would think, of political affiliation, most people would say that he has been a good representative and outspoken on Exeter's behalf. And we have every intention at the appropriate time to recognise that in some way or another, and I will obviously keep members fully advised of that. But I think it's important that we as an executive acknowledge, and we will of course write to Ben, and we will also write to Simon Jupp, who has also supported the city when he had the responsibility for St Louis and Clopsham. So I'll just move on. We've got no public questions. Before we go into the items, we have got quite a long agenda, and so I will ask opposition leaders if questions in relation to the recommendations. I will try to get you the answer for tonight. If there is any specific detail within the report you want to know, which really won't help us form a view on any of the recommendations, if we can't answer them, I'll ask you to put them in writing to us. And so if you can make your contributions and questions pertinent to the recommendations that we have tonight, that's not stopping anybody's right, because these items will come to full council only next week. Only next week you'll be able to stand up and say whatever you feel you need to say on that. It's just to help the business of the meeting this evening. So we will now move into item 6, which is the review of the corporate risk register. And here we are. You will see that we propose to cancel, the full council next week, any actions to help mitigate any of the risks for which it is responsible. And to introduce this corporate risk register, Dave Hodgson, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is the quarterly update of the corporate risk register. The risk register has been reviewed by directors and SMB as a whole in consultation with their relevant portfolio holder and any amendments made, and this is the updated register, which will also go to audit and governance in a couple of weeks' time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, David. Leaders, so if you indicate to me that you want to, because I won't ask you specifically, if you indicate that if you want to speak on any of the items, just raise your hand when the officer is finished. But on this occasion, I will ask you. No? Councillor Mitchell.
Just a point of clarification, really, Chair. We've got a recommendation which clearly indicates that the executive has to consider this report and come up with recommendations. I'm just wondering, in the way that the report is, the actual content of the report is laid out in its table format, we're often getting updates of action taken or proposed to be taken, which might affect the colour coding there. I'm not clear how this report enables you as an executive to identify sufficiently in regard to the recommendation, the actions you will be taking.
Okay, thank you. We'll try to deal with that at the end, Councillor. Okay, is there anybody else, members wish to speak? No. Oh, Councillor Wood.
It's just one of those things, the risk register is always list the risks. What this doesn't do is list our successes. So whenever this comes up, I always look at it and think, ooh, but actually there's so much we do that is bright green. And yeah, just making the observation really.
Okay, anybody else? Just so, I don't think you are suggesting we have a corporate success register. All I would direct you to is to the Labour Group's manifesto that we produce each year. That will tell you about the successes on the year. David, if you can just address this item, because although we've been doing the risk register now to executive for a number of months now, we've come out of a couple of elections where our heads have been in different places. I've now got a new executive redefined. I've now got a new SMB team, and just to say congratulations to those appointed SMB members. You started yesterday. Hopefully there are no regrets at this early stage, maybe later on. And so therefore, the clear direction that I've given the portfolio owners and SMB, that this is a key item on their regular meetings with the directors to go through the risk register to see all those risks, how we're doing and what needs to be reported. But Councillor Mitch was asked a couple of specific things there, David, if you could comment on those. But just to say, this is a evolving document, and if we can do it better, I want us to, Councillor. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Leader. So the intention of the recommendation isn't to necessarily change the scores of any risks that are on there. Hopefully, SMB and the portfolio holders have gone through them in detail and come up with valid and reasonable judgments as to why the risk is at a particular level. The purpose of the recommendation is if you feel there's something missing from the risk register that we need to go away, you may wish to recommend to council that it's looked into and potentially added to it. Or if you do feel that one of the risks in particular looks out of place in terms of its scoring or the colour coding, that SMB go back. What I'm not suggesting, or what's not intended from the recommendation, is that you hold a big analysis during the executive and come up with the full wording for an additional risk. It's about giving the executive and then council the opportunity to say, hang on, I think you need to think about this, or perhaps this recommendation is under or overstated in terms of its score. So that's the intention of the recommendation, but we're always happy to look at the wording of that going forward if it does cause confusion.
Thank you, David. And as I say, we'll try to improve on all of that. And as I say, the portfolio owners will own it a bit better with the directors. So there's the recommendation. I'm going to move it from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour of the recommendation?
That's unanimous, Chair. Has been carried.
Thank you. We move on to item 7 now, which is the overview of the General Fund Revenue Budget, quarter 4. And here there are 8 recommendations. David, can you speak to the paper, please?
Thank you, Leader. So this is the outturn report for General Fund Revenue Budget for 2023-24. In terms of the actual performance, we've taken £269,000 from the general fund balances at quarter three, we were projecting £284,000, so very close to projection at the end of quarter three. But that doesn't tell the whole story. As members are aware, because we've been reporting it every quarter since the start of the financial year, there were some significant challenges in this year's budget in terms of income targets that we didn't deliver, in terms of a higher than expected pay award, somewhat offset by the VAT ruling on in-house leisure and other things. But the overall performance is really masked by significant underspends in budgets, and those significant underspends generally relate to large projects, revenue projects that we were undertaking during the year, and therefore the money will be requested. And you will note there's a significant number of supplementary budget requests in one of the appendices to carry those projects forward. They're not stopping just because the end of the financial year has happened, and therefore they will go forward. In terms of that, the vast majority of those supplementary budgets are funded from earmark reserves, and therefore the funding will just remain in that earmark reserve until it's required to offset the expenditure that you've approved. But around £1.5 million are funded from the general fund working balance. So whilst we've taken only £269,000 from the general fund working balance during the financial year, we have had to set aside £1.5 million from the working balance to fund the supplementary budget approvals if they're approved by Council next Tuesday. What that's done in conjunction with the 24-25 budget that we've recently approved back in February means that we're going very close, projecting to go very close to the general fund minimum level of funds. Still above it, but very much closer. And that in itself is okay. You know, you set the minimum balance for a reason, that's the amount you need to offset any risks. And whilst you're above that, that's absolutely fine. And you know, a lot of argument could be made that previously we had too much in the general fund working balance. But we are now at a close position which will limit what you can do in terms of amending future budget requirements in the medium-term financial plan. So the key issues in the report are for you to approve the supplementary budgets, to note the earmark reserves as at the end of 23-24, so they're set out in one of the appendices as well. And clearly, whilst we've made amendments to the income targets for those budgets which were struggling, going forward, we will be closely monitoring and reporting back to members on performance against those revised budgets. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Just on a question before we go into discussion on the earmark reserves. We have asked, and you are going to present to, in the first instance, the executive, and then I'm happy to put that out to a members' briefing, a list of those earmark reserves. What are all those little pots? And I did follow up on the audit and governance training. I couldn't attend last night, but I did give it this morning. That's my life for you. On about the two earmark reserves and what is, and I thought that was quite interesting. Now that sounds terribly sad when I say I find the issue of earmark reserves interesting, but I know just to say that to the members that we will be getting that information, because I think it's an important piece of data that we need to know, because we are going to start going into budgets and everything else going forward. We need to understand what it's all about, and you've committed to do that, so that may take the sting out of something coming forward. So those are the recommendations. Do I have any observations? Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. Just make a note to make a comment about the minimum reserve level for general fund. because there's a few items which have sort of been flagged up again, which have been ongoing, and I'm not quite seeing where they're being addressed in the monitoring process. So, for example, the home call service and the mooring business in Exeter, and then there's issues that have been clearly indicated as warning signs, particularly in relation to the waste services and the maintenance work for leisure and non-leisure facilities. So I just wondered, I'd like to know how the portfolio holders are going to get involved in looking and doing this job of monitoring. I think it's an area that we can improve on as a council, and I'd like to hear what the portfolio holders have to say. Thank you.
Okay, some of that's detailed questions which we won't be able to deal with tonight, but please, if you can detail them in writing, because they don't relate to that. But it is, as I said, we're going to bring some stuff forward about the reserves coming forward. Is there anybody else? No? Right, so I'll open this up now to members of the committee to talk to the report and or the 8 recommendations before us. Councillor Bizard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight the income being generated by the solar farm at Water Lane, which is £72,000 already significant and not anticipated at the budget setting point. So that's very welcome. Plus, of course, what it's also doing in terms of generating power to many of our vehicles and buildings as well, with lots of potential for the future. So just wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? So as we are moving, there's some of those issues that Councillor Moore, I'm happy to take them, but as for how the portfolio holders will deal with it, we will be dealing with it, and we'll be having those discussions. I'm not sure if there's anything else you can add to that at the moment, David, is there?
No, I mean,
okay.
we've now got the new directors in place, and I would be expecting that their budget areas will be one of the key things that they discuss on a regular basis.
But I'm going to assure Councillor Moore we haven't lost sight of all those issues, because these are very important things that we are making clear to the portfolio holders how we need to deal with these things. So we've got the 8 recommendations there. So I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. Those have been carried.
Thank you. Right, we move on to item 8, which is the General Fund Capital Monitoring and Revised Capital Programme for 24-25 and future years. Here you've got 2 recommendations, which say there are amendments, funding requests, but there is an additional recommendation that I'm going to put to you now. Have you got the additional one there? There you go. And this says that it's £85,000 for the city wall following tender returns. So David, in a moment you can explain what the total amount earmarked reserve we had for that and why we need the £85,000. The £185,000 to complete the RAM re-roofing works. Again, what we did have and why we need that. And the £88,120 as a contribution to a scheme to repair the roof at St Nicholas Priory. What's that about? And what could concern a number of people, where it says the additions would be funded by borrowing. And as you know, as you told me earlier on today, the Public Works loan roll interest rate is something like 5.3 to 5.4, and we said that we're not trying to borrow money at the moment. So will this be new borrowing, or what? I'll leave you to explain how that borrowing will take place. Thank you, David. If you could explain all that.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so if we start with the additional recommendation prior to talking through the report, these are actually good pieces of news, and you will see that in the context of the report in terms of delivery last year. In that, members will recall last year that we have a budget to repair the city wall of around £500,000, and we went out to tender, and the budget, the last tender came in excess of £1 million, and was, an extra £5,600,000 worth of borrowing would have been required to deliver that. So the team went away and redesigned the scheme and went back out to tender. We've had tender prices back in, which are 85,000 above the budget that we set. So far more in line with something that we're comfortable, but it is above the budget that you have approved, and therefore we need to come back. Timing is everything. Tenders were completed and evaluated after this report was published, hence the additional recommendation tonight. So an additional 85,000 will see the city wall repaired by the city gate. The reason we've done the additional recommendation is that if we don't do it tonight, next council is October and we'd lose the tender bid. So we're asking for that. The museum, members will again recall that we were successful in a bid to the Arts Council to support repair of the roof over Gallery 22, I think, in the museum. The museum is a Grade 2 listed building. Grade 2 listed buildings are challenging. My understanding, and if you want any information on the really interesting work that's gone on, Pete Davis, who's part of Mike's team, who's overseeing the project, will talk to you from England about the craftsmanship and work that's been done to repair the roof, and it really is quite interesting. But unfortunately, it's an old building. Old buildings have hidden things, and therefore we need another 185,000 to complete that re-roofing work. It's well underway. It's almost complete, but we just need some additional funds to complete that and protect our Grade 2 listed building. The third one, we've had an approach, as members will be aware. Exeter Historic Buildings Trust has taken on responsibility for St Nicholas Priory from the council. That's a Grade 1 listed building, and also very old. The roof's in need of repair. They're making a bid to English Heritage for the vast majority of the scheme. The total scheme will be about £440,000. They're seeking a budget of up to £88,000 as match funding for the amount from English Heritage to secure the roof and enable them to continue the good work they're doing at St Nicholas Priory. From our point of view, it's a building that we're legally responsible for, so £88,000 to deliver a complete roof repair at St Nicholas would be a great result for us. So 3 very different reasons, but hopefully things that you can support. In terms of the borrowing, so as members will recall, we have a capital programme which is significantly funded by borrowing. But at this moment in time, we're not physically going to the PWLB and locking in taxpayers to repay loans over 50 years at extremely high interest rates. We're using our own cash reserves to do that. It will still show on our borrowing. We'll make a repayment of debt against it, but we're not physically locking into those interest rates at that level. So once we're sure, councillors, we continue to keep to the same strategy that you approved in February, the Treasury Management Strategy, where we won't engage in long-term borrowing until such point as interest rates have dropped to a suitable level. So in terms of the report itself, and this is why I'm quite pleased by 3 tenders, we did not have a successful year in delivering the capital programme last year. Total capital spend was £5.6 million. If members recall, last July, when you approved the revised capital programme for the year, the general fund capital programme was 72 million. So 6 million is a really small figure, and down to both resources but also tender prices coming in significantly higher. And it's not just property, it's right across the board of the capital programme. So all areas have been struggling to deliver within a reasonable sum, that we could come back to council and say, actually, we need a little bit more money. They just weren't coming in at that level. So I'm pleased to say this year, finance have worked really closely with project managers to better align the capital programme. I think project managers sometimes think if they don't put it in next year, I'm going to steal the money away and it's going to disappear from the budget and I'll never see it again. So I promise them that only you can steal the money, not me. Whilst you can never say never, because we don't know what the future is, we will properly plan the programme. It's a 4-year capital programme, so they can put it in appropriate years. So hopefully the capital programme going forward is more aligned to our ability to deliver. So I think that the programme for next year is somewhere, somewhere close to 34 million. The programme going forward is around £27 million, as opposed to the 72. Now within that capital programme, there will be some schemes, and I hope to draw this out in Q1 and continue in the monitoring. There are some schemes that we need to have approved, but the timing of them is uncertain. So you will recall we had an additional £11 million in the Guildhall Shopping Centre budget for capital spend. That's entirely reliant on when we need to support the fit out of new premises, and is completely therefore reliant on leases ending, not being renewed, and someone new coming in. So there are some schemes that are completely outside of our control, and particularly where there are schemes that we've had indications that there's a grant coming to support that, but we're not sure of the timing of that grant. So we'll try and pull those together so it manages expectations on delivery of them, so that you can see, and then we'll continue to monitor, hopefully a more aligned capital programme to our resources available. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, David. Before I do, I just want to make an observation about the additional recommendation going forward. Just if you can clarify the £88,000 plus for St Nick's Priory, that would only be paid as in when they got their funding.
That's correct.
Right, okay, so that's understood. Now, the other thing being is because the agenda for the full council has gone out, this is going to be also a recommendation to full council next week. It's gone out. I have no doubt that Mark will try to get as much of this into the minutes as possible, but those minutes won't be with councillors until in 2 or 3 days' time, and then to say to them, oh, and by the way, you've now got to hunt through to find out this little thing that we've thrown in there, is somewhat unfair. So I most probably will be asking you, deferring to you, when this recommendation is moved next week at full council, to make that explanation in detail, because there may be some questions coming from it. And that is in order to allow proper discussion, be a little bit transparent as to why we're doing it. Is that okay? Just make that clear. So there will be an opportunity next week to interrogate some of that. So on those recommendations and the report, do I have anybody wishing to come forward at the moment? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question following on from the additional recommendation in regard to the city wall, and what David said, as Mike Carson is here, I'm going to clarify. Does that also include the work in Northern Hay Gardens into a wall and the gate being replaced that has been closed for some years, or because David was implying it was another section of the wall, I just thought it was the complete wall, and whether the Northern Hay Garden section work is included within this funding?
Okay, thank you. Do I have anybody else? If not, I'll now go into, let Dave answer. We'll go into any members wish to make a comment. Councillor Fowle.
changing. My first question was similar to Mike's. Does the £500,000 you mentioned, plus the additional 85,000, complete the work necessary for the wall at the present time? And secondly, if we're borrowing from our own reserves, presumably that's at 0% interest and payable back within what time frame?
Okay, thank you for that. I've got no councillor right.
Thank you. Councillor Fold has just asked one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but just could you please clarify the city wall part that we're talking about? We're discussing this, it's not the whole of the city wall, it's the bit by City Gate house that was boarded up, and that's the bit that's going to be repaired. That's the extra.
Okay, good. Right, David will clarify that for us in a moment. You've got something else, was it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll say it. Has Exeter, the heritage people, are they aware of this? That we're going ahead with it? Maybe that's a question not for this actually. I'll ask Mike that later. Sorry, Chair.
Did we ask their permission?
No, not their permission. No.
Okay. I would have thought they would know about it from the email.
It's good news.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, there's Councillor Alcott.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say, I think it's really good news that this has come in much closer to the original budget, so well done. I was just curious if you, presumably you have looked into grant funding opportunities for the wall. I know it's quite unusual for a council to have responsibility for a Roman wall, but just curious to hear about that. Thanks.
Good point. Any further questions? No? And I'm assuming the warranty's run out on the wall anyway. David, if you can answer that.
You didn't secure section 106 contributions to its maintenance. So in terms of the wall, it is purely the part by City Gate. If only we could do the whole city wall for £580,000. Unfortunately not. So no, this is purely focused on repairing the wall on North Street. In terms of the way it's been funded, so it's really important. All we're doing is using our cash. So it's at 0% in terms of borrowing rate, but there is a loss of investment interest on that cash. So there is always an opportunity cost to using your own cash reserves. But over the longer term, it is better to take a short-term hit in the reduced investment interest we receive now, rather than locking in our cash at 5.4%, which in 50 years' time, the taxpayer would still be funding. So, as with everything in treasury management, it's a balance between the short and the long-term impact on the council's financial position. So, I think, does that cover all the questions? Because most of the questions were about the budget. Oh, in terms of have we looked for grant funding? Yes, we have. At this moment in time, there's none available, but it's certainly something that we'll continue to pursue as we go forward.
Can I ask a supplementary to that?
Very quickly.
If you do find an opportunity comes forward after we've already borrowed this amount, is that something that could be applied retrospectively?
Depends on the terms of the grant, but it could be very much put to use in other parts of the wall, and the other many historic buildings that we have available. So we have been quite successful in generating grant funding over the past few years from a variety of sources, and it's something we'll continue to look for.
Thank you, David. And indeed, you've told us that you've written to government when we're doing the annual settlement time and time again over the number of bridges, walls, and other things that we do not get any sort of specific funding for, sadly. Perhaps some of us may ask for that report to blow the dust off it and see if somebody else will have a look at it in a different light. So those are the recommendations, 3 recommendations, 2 in the paper, and one which was put to us. And just to remind us, there will be a detailed response from David at the council meeting next week. Sorry if that's you aren't planning on coming, Dave, you are now. So all those in favour of those three recommendations, say a second for the recommendation. All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair. Those have been carried out, isn't it?
Thank you. So I now move on to item 9, which is the HRA budget monitoring report, outturn. And here we have 6 recommendations, which again, I think it's David, I'm going to ask you to speak to, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm going to put on my smiley face now. So, quite a positive outturn report for the housing revenue account this year in terms of coming in under the budget that was anticipated, whilst delivering significant progress on the capital programme. So, in terms of the performance, it's much more in line with what we would hope for. So members will recall that we budgeted for a take of 2.8 million from the HRA working balance, but we actually ended up only taking 1.5 million. So we've delivered most of it. Part of that, as you will hear in the next report, Treasury Management, is down to investment interest. So the general fund invests all our money, but then it pays a relevant amount to the HRA based on its cash balances, and obviously, so the benefit of higher interest rates is felt by both the HRA and the general fund. As similarly, they're both challenged by the borrowing rates at this moment in time. So, but we've delivered the revenue budget with a significant underspend, and on top of that, we have also delivered quite a significant proportion of the HRA capital programme. Excuse me. So, sorry, I'm just trying to get to the right place on the report. So in terms of the overall capital programme, we delivered 24 million out of a revised 13.5 million pound capital programme, and that's split between 10.3 million on our existing stock and then 13.5 million towards the new build stock, most notably to the Vaughan Road. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions from Councillor Moore?
Thank you. I'd just like to bring a matter to the attention of the executive, 70, which has been an ongoing issue. Now, I expect you're not going to be able to answer tonight, but I do feel it's really important to bring your attention to the ash dieback budget, which has been in the council's HRA budget for a long while, and none of it is spent. Now today, at the planning member working group, we heard the biodiversity officer say how important it was that biodiversity is invested in before it is needed. And here we see a budget which is not being spent because we're waiting for the trees to die. So we have the budget, we need to plant the trees in advance. I've raised it a number of times at the Council Housing Advisory Board over the past 2 years, and this budget remains untouched. It is at risk of being cut, and we still see the risk of ash dieback, and so I'm disappointed to see that this budget remains unspent.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No? Right, I'll open this up to the committee. We'll deal with that at the end, by the way. I'll open up with any other remarks from any of the members. Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Chair. It's great to see the way that all this work has been done to be able to carry on with the capital programme and to actually see houses being built, and all that activity now is brilliant. So I would just like to note thanks to the officers for their hard work and the way that they've managed this. Am I allowed to say something about ash dieback? I know you take the ends, but I do remember, Chair, lots of discussion over this, and at the time when that budget was brought in to the HRA, it was there because there was an anticipation of ash dieback being very, very prolific across the UK and having a devastating, huge effect. What we actually found in the UK, but particularly here in Exeter, was that we didn't get the ash dieback disease as much as we thought we were going to get. So that money, as far as I remember, was there not to do any other tree replanting, but it was there to be able to deal with the actual effects of ash dieback. So you're not waiting for a tree to die naturally. It was if we had trees that had ash dieback, we know we would have to cut them down to stop that spreading, and then we would replant, but the replanting to replace wasn't all there was to it. So as very often, money that we get coming in to us for specific things can only be spent on specific things. And that ash dieback money was to be spent on a projected guessed amount of so many X amount of ash trees that were going to get ash dieback. And the big result of it was it wasn't that bad. So that money can't then be put into planting other trees or to plant a tree next to an ash, hoping that the ash is going to die from ash dieback so that we can plant one next to it. But if it does get ash dieback, it's going to actually pass it on to the one that you've just planted anyway. So I really hope that we get an end to this recurring discussion about it. And if I've got it wrong, I'm sure officers will correct me, Councillor Moore, and be able to give you a better understanding of it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, on that point, I'm going to ask the portfolio owner to have a look at that and bring back a statement for me on all of that, on what is correct, what isn't correct, what we're going to do to it, and what we can and can't do, and we'll see where we go from there. So those are the 6 recommendations. All those, I'm going to have a seconder, please. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair, that has been carried.
Thank you very much. We then move on to item 10, Treasury Management Report, and here we have that Executive and Council note the report. Dave Hodgson.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, this is the Treasury Management report, which aligns with the General Fund and the HRA budget outturn reports in terms of reporting in detail the performance in respect of Treasury Management. Just for some context about the economic position and in particular the challenging interest rates, challenging in terms of borrowing, good in terms of investing our surplus cash. I just want to bring your attention to section 8.1 on the second page, which is the economic context and interest rate forecasts of our Treasury Management advisors. And just to highlight the change in the last year, whereby there was quite an optimism about interest rates dropping quite significantly in February 2023, which has somewhat been tempered over the past financial year. Now, it's very early to say. We've obviously had a change of government, and that may have a future impact on the economic outlook, but it's a little early to say. But at this moment in time, we're still looking at, whilst lower interest rates for borrowing than we're currently experiencing now, and some 1.5% lower, stubbornly higher than I would have liked to have seen. I much preferred the February 2023 projections that they were making, where they were dropping below 3.5% over the medium term. They're now looking closer to 4%. I'm talking in terms of borrowing from the PWLB as opposed to base rate that people see in everyday life. Now, because we haven't physically gone out and borrowed any money from the PWLB over the last 12 months, we've actually benefited as a council from the higher interest rates. So all we do is post money with other local authorities and with a small number of banks and money market funds to generate interest. And therefore, we've had quite a significant increase in both the HRA's expected interest this year and also the general fund. And hopefully, as we continue this, whilst it might reduce slightly, we still expect there to be quite significant returns over the next financial year. So, as I said, that's been very similarly shared between the HRA and the general fund. So the general funds had an improved position of 747,000 compared to what we expected at budget, over £1 million for the HRA. Those figures have been somewhat included in the budgets for 2024-25, so hopefully we'll be close to the budget. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you for this report, David. At what stage do we admit what is a normal interest rate? Many people would admit the interest rates of the last 10-15 were historically low compared to what has gone in the past. So at what stage do you, as a Director of Finance, what figure would you put on a recommendation to this council that does stop borrowing again? Because I don't think we're ever going to get down to 1 and 1.5% again, 3.5% might be the new norm. So at what stage do you make a recommendation to council to borrow?
That's a good question for scrutiny when we do the budget, Councillor. Anything else? Right, to the members of the committee, is there any remarks to make? Councillor Wright.
Yeah, sorry, just got a question. Top of page 91. Sorry to ask, but can you explain to me what EZ is?
Eurozone. Eurozone.
Eurozone. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So just to say, I don't think, Councillor Mitchell, that we're going to make policy here tonight. Thanks and all that sort of stuff, or whatever, or do any insider trading and everything. But of course, I do note on page 93 the figure of 164.7 million, which was used by the Ratepayers Alliance as to the amount of debt that this council has. And even a couple of leaflets I saw going around in the local elections. But what they failed to realise, of course, was the net interest payable, which is the actual, we do owe that money, bearing in mind 54 million 10 years ago. Sorry, was it 56 million? 56 million we had to buy our own council houses back by the condemned government 10 years ago. So that was a debt that's going on and on and on. And also the actual net interest on 164 million is 1.5 million. I haven't got my calculator here, but it goes to some of your question, the point there, I think that's less than 1%. Less than 1%. If you were to average them all out, that we are actually repaying back. So I think that is good treasury management, Dave, and I congratulate you and the team for that borrowing imposed upon us by a condemned government that we're now trying to eke our way out of it. So that's just an observation, Dave. Is there anything else you want to add?
So just to say 1.5 million was the budget, the actual spend was 798,000.
Gets better, Dave.
So that 164 million is split between the HRA and general fund. The HRA's elements of that is around £72 million, and the balance over 92 million relates to the general fund. So 92 million net interest of £798,000.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure I have any legal entitlement to ask for a correction to be put in any future leaflets, but I may ask to see if we can look at that. So we've got the recommendation there. Can I have a second for the recommendation?
Okay.
All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair, that has been carried.
Thank you. That's item 10 down here. And now we're coming on to item 11, car park tariffs. Now, before we go any further, I have to say to you that obviously we normally seek to put up the car parking charges or revise them, I should say, in April of each year. We chose not to this year. We were mindful of the cost of living issue. We've looked at this, the executive has looked at this, and what I'm saying, and none of the directors know this at the moment, I'm actually seeking to withdraw this item. We're not going to rule on it tonight, but we are mindful that a consultation period needs to come forward with the car parking order. Okay, and there's some things that we're not. There are some things we could say, well, look, let the consultation go ahead, and we'll see what it says. I don't think that is the best way to run this. I think we need to be clear as a ruling group on what our position is on car parks and how we feel the charges should be in the city. We intend to do that. Now, I'm not proposing that we wait until October for the next council meeting, because this may have an impact on our financial outturn this year. So just to brief everybody, we may well either have a special executive and or a special council meeting to deal with the outcome of that. So I need to start working on that. I will be seeking a meeting with the director and the officer responsible to deal with that. So that's where we are with this. We're not progressing this at this moment in time. Okay, so do I need another motion to that effect? No, I don't.
No, it's a deferring matter.
Yes, no, that's right. To make sure I'm doing everything correct. But we can't hang around on that. We've got to move quick, if you know what I mean. So that will mean special meetings coming forward. Sorry about that. I know we've had quite a few of them. And new councillors, I promise that we only ever have meetings every 6 weeks or so. We seem to be having them every 6 days, but we will have to deal with that. It's very important that we get this right. This impacts on the council finances, and it also impacts on the daily lives of our residents and those people who come into Exeter. So I'm going to move us on now to item 12, which is in Exeter Business District Improvement. And I think you're declaring an interest, Councillor, right?
I'm not declaring interest because I sit on the board, Chair, so I'll remove myself.
You don't have to explain why you do, you just declare it, everybody.
Sorry.
No, that's right. It is a matter for the individual whether they declare or not, but there is no requirement for people to. It's a matter for the individual. If Councillor Wright wants to take herself out of the meeting, it is for her, and it is that. And that's there's nothing to debate.
Chair,
But you're not a member of this committee. You cannot ask me for a point of order, Councillor. It's
okay. Well, that's
Councillor Wright. Have you made a decision to leave the meeting?
Yes, I'm good.
There you go then. So I can't tell you not to. It is simple as that. All the advice we get, it is for the member to decide their interests or not, whether it's right or wrong. It is not a matter for our debate. So there we go. So we're now on item 12. Victoria, tell us all about the bid, please, and these recommendations that we've got before us.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the process and proposals for the third term of Exeter, which is the City Centre Business Improvement District. And the 5-year business plan is in the appendix, and the business is located within the bid, which is a quite a clearly defined area within the city centre. Vote upon the business plan in November. So it's a quite an official process that goes through. Sadly, Nicola, who's the Chief Executive of Exeter, sadly she can't attend tonight, so she does send her apologies. The bid levy payers are voting in favour of the business plan in November.
And that's the 5-year business plan, which is being developed in consultation with the business community that's located within the Business Improvement District. And that consultation period has taken over this spring and little bits of last year as well. So it's been quite a full and engaging consultation process. There's been some small changes around the bid boundary in removing West Street, Bartholomew Street West and New North Road. And the reasons for that is because there's just so few bid and levy payers within those particular streets. But if those businesses want to receive the benefits of the bid, then they can become associate members, so it doesn't kind of exclude them from the activity. The third term has a real focus on supporting businesses located within the city centre, and it's on things that matter to businesses within the city, and that's been raised during the consultation. And the priorities for the next bid term is around safe and secure, enhanced environment, celebrating our city, and better businesses. So that's about supporting the business community. Thank you, Chair. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Leaders, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, and I very much welcome this. The bid makes an important difference in the city centre, and it is a bit disappointing to hear that the area is being reduced a bit. I just wondered if there was any thought being given again to future possibility that it might extend to the key businesses. So I think there is an important link between the business and the key and the city centre. But I welcome their work. They're working really hard with businesses, and they're also looking to extend their relationship with local communities within those areas of business, and so they make a valuable contribution to the city.
Thank you. Right, no other. I'll open it up to the committee. Councillor Bizzard.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to welcome this report too and the work that you've done in Victoria with the bids, and note the contribution it will play, how it will continue to play towards our net zero carbon city ambitions. And I would welcome the opportunity with our incoming programme manager to meet with in Exeter to discuss some of the ways that might be brought forward. But yes, otherwise just a thank you for the report and fully back the recommendation.
Okay, do I have anybody else? So, Victoria, I don't think there's anything else for you to come back on. We will look at whether or not, I think that has been asked before, any potential district, but that's a matter for the bid. And we can pass that on to the portfolio holder who sits on the board, who's outside the room. She decided to, as to whether or not they wish to do that. But I think, we wouldn't discourage that, if you know what I mean. I think that would do. Okay, so those are the recommendations. 6 recommendations in front of us. Oh, can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Williams. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. Those have been carried.
Thank you very much. Can somebody ask Councillor Knight to come back in? Thank you. Councillor Wright. I don't want to say I wasn't here for the start of this talk outside. And Victoria, I'll check the diaries with you if you stay to the end. Right, who else have we got missing? Frogs in the wheelbarrow, isn't it? Jumping out. That was a long cigarette. Okay, welcome back. Okay, thank you. So we're on to item 13 now. Livable Water Lane Development Framework and Design Code Supplementary Planning Document. And here is the 3 recommendations. And there is a link there to all the papers. I was asked by Pierre, I said, please, it's such a big document. It's our little contribution portfolio for climate and environmental, not to reprint that one, but it's there for us all to see. Very important. It's quite a large document. So those are the three recommendations, which I'm going to ask you, Ian, to talk to, please.
Thank you, Chair. It is a long set of papers. If I can indulge you with a few minutes just to sort of describe what this work is about and what it's intended to do, I'll try not to take up too much time. I think everybody knows, first of all, Water Lane is one of the City Council's strategic priorities and is a key livable Exeter regeneration opportunity down there by the River Ex and the historic ship canal. In actual fact, most of Water Lane has been allocated for a development for a very long time, about 20 years, in fact, and that comes from the current core strategy document and its predecessor, which was published many years ago. And in those documents, there's also was a commitment to produce a master plan for Water Lane as well, and this SPD effectively delivers on that promise. What I'd also say is that actually, in actual fact, over that time, probably now is probably a good chance. There is a good chance that development will actually happen down in Water Lane. And I think the timing of this SPD therefore is very important. It can shape what happens in Water Lane and help the City Council to coordinate and make decisions about the design and infrastructure that could come forward. I think it's also important to highlight that because there is actually a lot of development interest down there in Water Lane, this document can also help frame some of the conversations with the developers as their own plans come forward. As you've already mentioned, Chair, there's a significant amount of technical work that's gone into the SPD, and that's reflected in the document itself, but also all the evidence that supports it. So we've appended some of that evidence base as well, although that itself doesn't form part of the SPD. I felt it was important that you saw some of that evidence base just to see how robust it is and how much work has actually gone into that. All of that work has been prepared by consultants and a consultants team. That's been led by LDA Design. That work was actually paid for from a government grant from Homes England under the Garden Communities programme, and all the work was project managed by Catherine Smith, who's part of the local plans team, to bring this to you tonight. So I'd like to thank all of those people for all the amazing work that they've put in. As well as all the technical work, the other major part of the work that the teams have done is on consultation and engagement, and I will talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment. So the SPD itself then, it hooks onto that existing core strategy policy, which allocates Water Lane for residential-led mixed-use development. And that's really important because once it's adopted, if Exeter recommends to the council to adopt the SPD, it will have formal planning policy weight ahead of the emerging Exeter local plan. Now that is also really key, as I've already mentioned, that there is live conversations going on with developers and with land promoters. So having that document in advance of the Exeter plan has become quite important in helping to, first of all, bring to life some of the livable Exeter principles that we've talked about and you've seen previously. But it's also to frame what we hope is a high quality, sustainable development across the whole area. What often happens is with developers, they come forward with individual proposals for their own land. What this does is bring all of that together. I like to equate it to a jigsaw puzzle. So we've created the picture for that jigsaw puzzle and helping those pieces come together. Those pieces are about infrastructure. It's about coordinating infrastructure to make the place work. So place making is absolutely key. But as I already said, it also supports that collaborative working between landowners who don't always want to talk to each other, if I'm honest, but we brought them together through this process, and they are now engaging with each other and with us in a really collaborative way. The other thing that this work has done is enable that engagement with key stakeholders, particularly the local community. So what we've done through this process is initially there was an extensive 6-week consultation on the draft. You remember that going back to October to December last year. That was really encouraging in the sense that it also ran alongside the consultation that we did on that particular version of the Exeter plan. So it benefited from that wider sort of engagement exercise. So we use the same online digital platform. We did similar exhibitions, 2 of which were held actually down on the quay. One of them was in the Custom House. So we did all of that, if you like, statutory consultation well in advance of finalising the document. But what I'd also like to say is that we did so much more than that. Even before the first version of the document was published, the team engaged with local people and local businesses. There was a set of citizens panels, there was one-to-one conversations, and there was drop-in sessions, so people could really get to understand what was being proposed, what was being prepared before it was actually written. Also at that moment, we started the consultation engagement with other stakeholders. So that includes the developers and the landowners, but really importantly, it involves statutory bodies. There's a lot of issues, as we know, down in Water Lane. So talking to people like the Environment Agency, Historic England and others was really key to understanding those constraints. So having done all of that work and then done the formal consultation, that work hasn't stopped, it's continued. Right up to the present day, we're still talking to various stakeholders, landowners and developers. That work will carry on even beyond the adoption of the SPD, because it's critical to actually delivering development. We don't stop just at a document, we carry on working with all the various stakeholders. So throughout that process, there has been some significant changes to the actual document. So we've listened to the voices of local people and to those statutory bodies and actually to landowners. Some of the changes that have been made, the document itself doesn't look massively different, but there are some key changes within it compared to the draft version. So just in no particular order, so we've reconfigured where the neighbourhood centre would go, and also have introduced some more flexibility around the location of the primary school that's required down there to allow that flexibility. There's been a refinement to some of the facilities around water access, including the relationship with the canal and Gabriel's Wharf. That is now really clearly set out as a key requirement. There's more controls now in the document around things like building heights, street design, and density to make that really clear what the controls are. More flexibility on the types of housing. So as well as apartments, it does now allow for townhouses. And last but not least, a lot more clarity around the priorities that have been given to cycling and walking, but also introducing bus routes if that's possible, but also making it clear what the restrictions are on car parking. So the final thing to say really is that the structure of the document itself is really important. It sets out a vision for Water Lane, which is in effect, without reading out the whole vision, the vision is in effect extending the quay into Water Lane, and that vibrant mixed use community that we all know and love down there is to be carried forward into Water Lane. It also sets out that framework, sort of master plan, if you like, for how all of the pieces of the jigsaw will fit together. And then finally, it sets out a code or rules, if you like, for when development comes forward. There are some basic rules to follow and to guide those development proposals. And those rules, if you like, are divided into 7 key principles, which are all based on the livable Exeter principles. I won't go into detail, I'll just remind you what those 7 principles are. So, memorable spaces, so that's all about understanding the context and the grain, particularly around the historic environment and the fact that it does sit by a canal and a waterway. Outstanding quality, so this is we want this to be one of Exeter's flagship developments. So the rules talk about design quality and sustainability, so that's net zero, adaptability to climate change and resilience to climate change. Welcoming neighbourhoods, that's really all about the place-making elements, all the things that you'd want to see in your local neighbourhood, schools, local services, shops, workplaces and employment uses, all the things that make a community work are into that principle. Livable buildings, that's about the issues around responsiveness to density and height, and the character and relationships between different areas within Water Lane. Active streets, that is essentially about walking and cycling being the natural and first choice for movement around the neighbourhood as opposed to the car, but not forgetting that there will be opportunities for new electric buses to go through Water Lane. 2 more to go. Spaces for people and wildlife, that's really all about opportunities for green infrastructure and natural spaces. And finally, the 7th one, which is all around connected culture. And this particular area, that's about creative industries, that's about meanwhile uses, but it's also about celebrating opportunities for events and arts and performance that could be generated locally by local people. So all of that work goes into I think it's nearly 300 pages, plus all the appendices that go with that. I think it's a really important step forward for Water Lane and almost gives that opportunity, that catalyst for regeneration, and it will play a really crucial role going forward in that work. However, the SPD itself also acknowledges that in itself isn't necessarily going to deliver development. There's more work to be done, working with the community down there, working with landowners and developers to bring forward land, to bring forward infrastructure, secure some of the funding for the infrastructure, tackle some of that really key viability work, but also think about stewardship as well. So when development starts to happen, how it's going to be looked after and cared for. All of that work needs to happen and is ongoing, but I think the SPD is a great start, making a great start from that. It's an opportunity now for us to really get going and see Water Lane delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Very detailed, and I know there's been a lot of consultation. It's been to kind of a working group, we've been to members, we've had a meeting with the leaders, and so there it is. Those are the recommendations. We adopt it. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Leader. As you know, we raised some questions in the previous meeting, so I won't go over those. My concern is, we all share the vision of what we want to achieve here. To what extent does the SPD provide us with that protection against the developer who doesn't buy into that vision? And particularly with the pressure from government for more housing, quite rightly, more to be built, etc. What security does the SPD provide us for delivering this vision?
Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate the work that's gone into this. It is a significant development that will have a massive impact on the city, and also recognise very much the timing issues. So I just want to say very much that I've heard from residents that they are very open to the development, so there isn't I haven't heard large voices saying we don't want any, so So it's generally welcome, and I welcome the further commitment to working with the community. We've had a meeting with leaders and with other meetings, and I think there's just a couple of issues that I do need to highlight here. I think that the increased density, I welcome that, and I think it's all now going to lie in design. And I am concerned that there will be big beige blocks all along the canal, just as there is on the other side. So I really would urge that we pay a lot of attention to the design, and I am really concerned about the southern zone allowing up to 9 stories being acceptable, because that is extremely close to the canal with the environmental impact that would have if it overshadowed it. One of the things that we talked about at our meeting, the leaders' meeting, was necessity for a primary care facility. And I know there has been discussions with the local NHS, and I would really like to recall it here that we really absolutely need to push for a GP and other primary care facilities, particularly a dentist. And I would like that to be on the record and the commitment. I'm sure that the leader will share that we will follow up that as a council to ensure that this new community gets the access to the services that they need. I've just got 2 other points, and I will be quick, but this is absolutely important issue. So St David's Council very much welcome the bridge across the canal for active travel. That is really important. I recognise that there is some concerns about that from water users and those responsible for the canal. So hopefully there can be built-in money from developers to enable ongoing maintenance of that and enable its proper usage, because I assume it will have to move in order to enable the ship canal to work. And finally, I would like to have a genuine question here, because throughout the document it talks about a real commitment to limiting climate impacts and environmental impacts. But the documents that are associated with the SBE say that there is no need for strategic environmental appraisal. So will the developers be expected to provide that to demonstrate that they will have a zero carbon impact in terms of construction and in use, and low impact in terms of the environment? Because if we don't know as a council what the benchmark is and what the position is, how do we expect the developers to show that? So those are my points I would like to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. It's just the point, pleased to hear Gabriel's Wharf mentioned, and the absolute need that whoever comes forward to develop that site understands that that must remain open, and that means the necessity perhaps of getting some very heavy equipment down there at all times. And as long as that is absolutely clear in the SBD, because it's so vital to the canal. Thank you.
Okay, I'll open it up now to members. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Jobson. But let me reassure you that I've had reassurances from the team involved that yes, the message about Gabriel's Wharf has been made loud and clear. I want to thank the team for a fantastic job, and I know I'm stealing what your comments here name it, but this is an incredible document, and it's I think it's an example of good practice in consultation, in actually presentation of a huge amount of material in a very readable and accessible way. So yes, very, very well done, and particularly Catherine. I also think that I would recommend people might also want to dip into Appendix B, which is the consultation statement. There you can see the responses to all the comments that have come in, and I think that is also testament to the fact that you've done a really thorough piece of public consultation, and I'm just full of admiration and thanks to the team. I've just got one question for clarification, because it is yet to be adopted. Where we've got planning applications coming in at the moment which involve this particular area, how are we sort of dovetailing this information with those? Are we able to do that?
Okay, thank you. We'll come to that in a moment, Councillor. I'll come to you at the end. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. In my own ward, in Home, we had a master plan for the Munkerton development, Bilbao Munkerton development. And it went into a lot of detail, but this is so much more, and the site is so much more impactful for the city. But it is us living and delivering on what we say. This is highlighting and prioritising brownfield development. It's talking about quality, climate-ready buildings, which is what we have to do. There are so many buildings going up around the city that will need to be retrofitted to be climate ready. I mean, it's just bonkers. But this is us as an authority seeking to direct the appropriate, sensitive development of a key area within the city, right adjacent to the Riverside Valley Park. You've got the new Marsh Barton station, which we helped to enable it to come into being. And I think this is a great example. And the fact that it's an SPD means that it's not just a document as it was in the Munkerton and Hyde Barn master plan. This is actually something that can be used appropriately to make sure that development happens in the way that has been consulted on. People have had views on this that they've listened to, and this is the final result. But it is something with teeth, and I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nobody else, I'll come on to hopefully holder.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Councillor Williams, you've done a really great job of doing all of the thanking, so I won't repeat that. But I do think, as you said, it's a really good example of good consultation. And I think we're in an era now where certainly we've seen around other issues, communities don't always sort of believe it when we say we're doing a consultation, we're actually going to listen to the responses. So it's really heartening to hear that that's actually changed, this final version of the document, and you've taken that all on board. I feel very passionate about our sort of brownfield first approach, but we all know all of the constraints around actually delivering that, particularly in terms of infrastructure and viability. So I think what's so exciting about this document is that we are really leveraging our position, going above and beyond almost to help enable that by joining the dots, bringing people together, looking at infrastructure and such. And it really gives me hope that, the principles of Livable Exeter are going from sort of sitting on a page to actually being really brought to life, and just in time to actually be used as a living document as we're seeing these applications come in. So it's really exciting, and it's really good to hear from Councillor Moore that it's got a lot of community support in the area as well. So I feel like it's a really exciting time. I'm really looking forward to seeing this coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to say at the end there, we'll deal with some of those points because I think it is, and I agree, this is an important part of town. Let's get the bridge right. I don't want to bequeath that to councillors in 30 or 40 years' time that that bridge is falling down or whatever. So we'll make sure we get that right. As for the beige buildings, I agree with you, but can I say to directors, if you got any leftover paint from ECL in the colours that they use, I'd rather you didn't use those colours, but I just thought I'd say that now. I don't know if you've seen them, it's a bit garish. But anyway, we'll leave that there. But that is a good point, by the way. And you come down on the train in Taunton. Well, they have done that by the state, but they're all the same, aren't they? And so it does look a little bit bland come the end. It's good development. Also, if we can deal with about the protection against developers who may claim all sorts of things after the event as to why they can't do it, that would be interesting to hear. Also, what Councillor Moore has asked about the climate and what provisions that we are doing, because we've got a great opportunity here to actually demonstrate what a brownfield site in the heart of the city, a vibrant city, could be. And I would like to be showcasing this if not only for funding, somewhere else at the appropriate time. So getting it right, community support, and I get about the height as well, by the way, but I'm assuming a lot of that will come into causing darkness over the, I would have thought that would come into a planning measure when it comes to, so yeah, but these are all things that we need to be aware of. So if Ken is, answer those couple of things about the climate, about the protection, those are important things. And just to say, also about the GPs and everything else like that, I did give a commitment, and I know a certain MP now is very keen on dentistry and that sort of stuff, and so I was going to say, I'll give him something to get his teeth into, but I think I'll use a different one, but that may be something that we need representations about, and not just this, but for other issues in the city. So if we can have a couple of issues about that.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd just like to say thank you also for the amazing comments. We will take those back to the team, they're really appreciated, and we'll certainly make them aware of those, so thank you. There's a couple of questions that I think go together actually. There's the protection from developers one, and also how it might impact on current applications. I mean, those members who sit on planning committee might remember we've already had one planning application come forward now to planning committee in Water Lane. That was the Haven Banks retail park application, and that was quite an interesting case study on how a live living document can actually influence a planning application that's coming before, even before that document is adopted. So we sat down, the team sat down with those developers and started to work through early versions of the design code to make sure that their planning application did conform. And it was a really, really good process, because that application changed radically during its lifetime. We only did that because we had the draft design code. We wouldn't have been able to have those conversations without having that document in place. Even though it had no weight at the time, developers took it seriously and sat down with the team, not me, and worked through that in detail and changed the scheme quite radically before it came to planning committee. In terms of going forward then, so the protections that are in place within the code, there are requirements in there, so there are rules in there that if they're not complying, we can use those to determine planning applications. Like any policy or any SPD has to take into consideration lots of issues, so it's not cast iron. If they don't follow the rules, it won't work. But it is a tool that we can use to influence, but also where we feel there are some key issues, it can allow us to determine planning applications based on those rules. The issues around detail and design, height, massing, protections for climate impact, they can be dealt with at the planning application stage. So this is a guidance document. It doesn't have all the answers. It provides some guidance and some rules. So when developers do come forward with their detailed applications, they're actually subject to even more rigorous tests and evidence-based requirements that we would require. So this, in some ways, what this document set out, a shopping list. The developers said these are the things you've got to now consider in detail. So when we get to those detailed stages, we'll be able to look at what information the applicants produce to support their more detailed plans and proposals. So it provides a framework for that, and then allows that to go, as I say, with the Haven Banks retail park, that actually did happen.
Okay, thank you, Ian. So we've got the three recommendations there. I'm going to move them from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair, which have been carried.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 14, which is productivity plan, and there's two recommendations here. So we've got Joan Gallant to tell us all about this piece of work that she was gifted by the outgoing government. Joan.
Thank you, Chair, and hopefully I will be brief. So the two recommendations are that the committee notes and approves the productivity plan and grants delegated authority to the Chief Exec in consultation with the leader to make any necessary drafting amendments before publication. So if there are any issues that we reflect on having looked at the report here today, and agree to those recommendations and pass those forward to the chair or the chief exec, and we can certainly ensure that those amendments get made. I hope the report is self-explanatory, and I've tried to set out really clearly what the requirement is for a productivity plan, where it's from. And as you can see, our monitoring officer has made it really clear that this is not a statutory responsibility, despite the tone from government and the positioning of the requirement, inverted commas, for a productivity plan. This is something that is a discretionary thing for us to do. Because there has been a degree of controversy within the sector about the nature of the letter from the minister and the requirement, there's been a lot of discussion within the Local Government Association and other representative bodies, and there has been representation made to government prior to the announcement of the general election with concern about intent. And subsequent to the announcement of the intention to have the general election, there was another flurry of conversation about what should councils do. And on balance, the strong advice from the LGA was for councils to comply and to look at the opportunity to set out a story, if you like, around productivity and our future plans is something, you know, constructive that is worth investing in terms of describing our narrative and taking an opportunity to review where we've come from and where we intend to go to. And that's the spirit in which the Senior Management Board has compiled the report. One of the challenges in bringing the report together is that the letter from the Minister did not set out any clear definition of productivity, but made a range of statements around productivity, some of which, when you look at the detail, is actually conflicting. So our approach has been to enter into the spirit of intent and to see it, as I said, as a tool that we can use to reflect on where we've come from and where we're going to going forward. So that was all I intended to say, and I hope that the content of the report does exactly that.
Thank you very much, Joe. Councillor Mitchell.
Just an observation, Chair, and this is welcome information and something as an authority we should be doing, looking to increase our productivity year in, year out to cut our base cost level. It was interesting today that there was a joint report from, I think, Cambridge and Salford University on the success of the 4-day week in South Cambridgeshire, which was highly criticised by the government, who thought, no, that's something that shouldn't happen. They found in all except 2 departments or anything up to a 22% gain on working on a 4-day week. And I would like the leader to actually consider looking at that report to see whether we as an authority might see a direction we might to move in, because of the difficulty we have recruiting staff, which was the issue they had. And they found staff recruitment and retention improved dramatically.
Thank you. Before I move on, I dream of the 4-day week. And there is a leaders meeting that the leaders of council have been asked to come along to a meeting. I think it's the 16th of July, which I'm registering to go along because I'm quite curious to listen to it. So we'll take it from there. So, is there anybody else? If not, I'll come to other members of the committee. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I appreciate all the background you've given us about why this document was written. Maybe it didn't have to be, but you took advice from the LGA and went ahead and did it anyway. But it's really useful to have so much information about what we have done, what we're going to do in this as a really easy to pick up and read document for any members of the public or any members or any officers as well, just as a reminder of where we are going with things. And I think reading through it's there's loads of points in there that I think, yeah, we've been ahead of the game in a lot of ways. Some ways we've been behind it a little bit and now we're catching up, but seeing what we're doing there with all the new data policies. I will say again, I say it every time I get the opportunity, but the agile and flexible plans that came in place in 2019, which I mentioned in here, really just kept us going throughout COVID, whereas a lot of other councils have been, and businesses have been really on the back foot. So I think Councillor Mitchell was sort of mentioning that we should be looking at ways of increasing our productivity. That's been going on for years, but this has just actually come together in a really easy to look at document to prove it, if you like, and get it all together. That work is ongoing, and we'll carry on growing with One Exeter and the digital transformation as well. So I just want to say thank you very much for putting this together in an easy to read and great document. Even if we didn't need to do it, I'm really glad that we have. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else? Councillor Wizard.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to echo what Councillor Wright said about, I think, very worthwhile exercise wherever it ends up. Very useful document to have and to be able to show people. And what particularly drew my attention was the section on barriers to productivity, because, well, they asked the question, the last government, and we've given them some of those barriers, the things we talked about earlier with Dave, including our responsibilities for the X and the canal and Roman Wall and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see. I think we have a more sympathetic ear now. I would say that, but hopefully that's the case, and interesting to see what comes back and where this goes. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Nobody else? Actually, if you weren't told to do it, Joe, you must probably be sitting around and say, look, I'd like you to write us a brief on what we're going to put to government about Exeter. Because looking at page 189, you know, the context and background to Exeter City Council, and you just read the background. That tells you the city that we're living in. And if it didn't say Exeter on the top, I might be saying, I'd like to live there. Well, I do, I'm glad I do. So I think it will be a useful document. It's not going to be wasted. It may lay on the government somewhere, but I think we'll be dusting it down, we'll be using it, and I think it will form part of much of what we will end up doing when our ask for various things that will be coming forward at some stage. What I'd be curious to know is, and I wouldn't want to, I suppose I could search the websites of other local authorities. I'd like to hear what the others in our Devon, what they look like. I'd like to sort of compare them and have a look at them, to be brutally honest. But that's just me being a bit curious to see where we can do. But that may be an interesting sort of bit of research as well, how we compare with others. So Joe, thank you very much for that work. It's not been wasted. And so those are the recommendations, everybody in front of you, 2 recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. It has been carried.
Okay, so we now come on to item 50.
Yeah, I'm going to declare a non-pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So King George V playing fields, we've got a recommendation here. I've got Mike and Dave. Who's going to talk to it? Mike, can you tell us all about King George V playing fields, please? What's going to happen there?
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. This is a report seeking authority to enter into an agreement for lease, subject to the agreement to detail terms by the city surveyor in consultation with the leader. Reason for this, we were approached as a consequence of the Exeter playing pitch strategy approved in January 23 by Exeter City Community Trust, who identified ways in which they could help us to start to deliver on some of the strategic outputs that we're looking for. But in order to unlock the funding streams to deliver those ambitions, they have identified a requirement for them to have a leasehold interest of the King George V playing fields. Because it is our intention to deliver on the aspirations of the Exeter playing field strategy, we were open to that approach, and we've identified obviously ongoing operational and repair savings that will accrue to the council as part of that process.
as well as the opportunity to deliver new facilities for sport, leisure and community in this area without the need for Exeter City Council capital investment or additional borrowing. There are mechanisms under discussion at the moment with the Trust for securing our existing income streams or replacing those existing income streams as part of the leasehold agreement, so we will be substantially in pocket rather than out of pocket as a consequence of this potential transaction. The legal team have drawn your attention to the requirements for best consideration. This is rehearsed in the report, and we identify the possible best consideration issues to be more than outweighed by the investment that will be leveraged into the site as a consequence of the leasehold interest being delivered. Similarly, there is a requirement to advertise this as a public open space disposal. Originally, this was intended to happen alongside this report going to committee before the general election. Unfortunately, the advert was placed just prior to the announcement of the election, so we weren't able to share the information that we've shared with members in the report here, specifically the Exeter City Trust's prospectus, effectively there, which is what we're attempting to deliver here. That public open space advert has completed. We have the submissions. We're discussing with James Bogue in the communities team to prepare our responses to those, and we'll circulate those to members when they're ready. There's also a need for consent from Fields in Trust at the FIT. King George V playing field is a dedicated trust, and we can't dispose of property interest in it without their consent, so that process discussion is also ongoing. There is an intention, which I can confirm, to carry out a proper and full public consultation in the late summer and into the autumn on these proposals. There will be local event surveys and informal opportunities for people to comment on these and expand on the points that they've made in response to the public open space disposal notice. Effectively, the report goes on to talk about the history of the playing fields and what it provides there now, some of the issues that we've got in terms of our ability to look after those pitches and those facilities now with our current budgetary constraints. Very briefly discusses the suggested improvements or potential improvements that could be delivered by this proposal, and then identifies where those outcomes fit in with citywide benefits and where they sort of fit into our corporate plan, particularly around the healthy and active agenda. There are some risks related to whether or not floor funding can be delivered. However, we will say that nothing will proceed unless there is sufficient investment forthcoming as a consequence of this agreement for lease to generate a sufficient weight of investment in the facility that makes the whole thing worthwhile doing in the first place. The alternative is effectively to carry on the status quo, carry on running the playing fields as they are now, but this obviously doesn't take us anywhere near to delivering the enhanced facilities that the playing field strategy was attempting to bring forward.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, I'm sure we'll welcome this development. I just want to be reassured, will the lease, in the writing of the lease, be able to ensure that it remains for community use throughout the duration of the lease and public access is guaranteed? Then others doesn't morph into something else once we've given the lease to another body.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. We're pleased to hear that Councillor Mitchell's asked for my question. So I'm going to ask the questions again that I asked at the scrutiny, which I didn't receive clarity on. In principle, I agree with community asset transfer and use for community purposes. But I wanted to know, in terms of the lease and any agreement that we put in place, whether there can be an increase, a commitment to increasing in biodiversity. Sometimes sports uses conflict with nature uses, and we need to make sure that there is not only preservation but increase in biodiversity, and also in terms of plastic use in playing pitches and any upgrades. I understand that Sport England is looking at alternatives such as cork in terms of the quality of playing pitches and moving away from plastic. Can we ensure that we don't in future allow plastic pitches which then leach into the environment and degrade it? And just in terms of the public consultation, if we sign any lease now, how meaningful would that consultation be in terms of any safeguards that may need to be put in place as a result of that consultation feedback?
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I'll deal with those things at the end. Come to you at the end, Councillor Wood. Councillor Fogg.
Thank you, Chair. I chose not to declare a non-pecuniary interest because I'm absolutely delighted at these proposals. I played football all my life. Back in the 60s and 70s, the local leagues used to involve hundreds of men playing football in numerous leagues across every village and city. Those local leagues have died a death, but more people are playing football. And those people are not just men, it's men and women, it's boys and girls, it's even old people like me. What we lack, and it's been identified, are 3D pitches. It's been identified as a shortfall of 3 community 3D pitches in the city, so this is the first one that's been proposed. I personally drive to Plymouth, to Clevedon, to Weston-super-Mare, to Bournemouth virtually every week to play on an appropriate surface. And for the capital city of Devon, I think it's a great shame we don't already have those facilities in place. So again, I welcome these proposals, particularly the 3D, and hope they'll be there before I hang my boots up.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Yes, it was very unfortunate, the timing of the election in terms of when the statutory consultation for disposal of the land was initiated, and then there was no information to go with it. So I think there was understandably some concern by some members of the public who interpreted this as trying to hide something. So this is great news that there's going to be a full public consultation. I just wanted to ask you for a little bit more clarity of what information would be provided to the public. So in the sense it dovetails with Councillor Moore's question in terms of the timing of signing a lease and the public consultation itself.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Councillor Wood, did you want to come in on this one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've been involved through my role as portfolio with the development of this scheme. It's been going on for quite a while, kind of tentatively exploring how the trust can support the aims and objectives of the council. This is a fantastic resource that we have there. It's a large open space, and there are a lot of facilities there, but it's not used to the absolute optimum that it can be. And so the facilities that are there are tired and dated. And one of the confusing things, I think, is that people look at my portfolio and think I'm responsible for this sort of area. More than the actual area, my role is to look at the outcomes, and the outcomes are listed within this document. So it is about, how can we encourage people to be active, and those that are active, what opportunities do they have? And the working with the trust, looking at how this site can be used, is really, really impressive. The level of detail that they have gone to, the things they have considered, is really, really good. And we are going to see some fantastic new opportunities there for a wide range of people to be involved in more than just football. I know it's the football trust, it's the Exeter City Trust. but there's a lot more than football going to be on the site. And I think it's important to note that although we talk about disposal of land, actually all we're looking at is somebody different managing the kind of resources we expect there, but updating them, expanding them, developing them. So you will still have this massive, lovely green space where you can play all sorts of sports. You'll have more to play, more options, but you can walk your dog there. You can access the field. Nothing changes. What we've got is a committed partner who is keen to help the city to provide the sort of resources that we know the city needs. And as Bob has mentioned, we have a playing pitch strategy. It's identified that we've got some gaps. This is helping us to fill some of those gaps. So it's great. Fully supported.
Thank you. If there's nobody else, just make a couple of remarks. Well, we do have a couple of 3G pitches. There is one in Exwick. Well, you chose to move to Orpington. There's one in Exeter, and what I would say that is basically oversubscribed. But what the similarity and why I mention it, and it gives a bit of insurance to perhaps Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Moore, what we have there is an arrangement, although it's run by the college, whereby interested group, local residents, councillors, users are part of a group that discuss issues with the college on a regular basis. It's not quite a moaning, it's quite positive. And if you read the papers, that would be created there as well. That would have proper engagement. It is a busy place, particularly on the Saturday afternoons and Sunday mornings with football. And just to add, Councillor Fole, the Devon and Exeter Amateur Football League is the biggest football league in the country, with over 10 divisions. So it's not reducing, it's actually expanding. And you're right, it is. Football is expanding, particularly the women's game. And part of what they're proposing here is for Exeter City's women's team, which has gained promotion, which we celebrated down at the City Guild Hall a number of weeks ago. Very important that we are seen to be giving them good facilities in order for that game is taking on and improving. And the other thing about, will we lose? I don't believe that at all, because as Mike Carson mentioned, fields in trust, whatever not to say, it will all be conditioned. And I feel sure that we are not going to sign off agreements or have stuff coming in, because they've got to get all their funding in place first, which is going to take time. And we are not going to sign agreements before we've consulted. I mean, it's just not going to happen in that way. So whether I've answered some of that for you, Mike, but I feel sure that is the position. And I think it is good that we work with Exeter Community Trust, who do a lot of awful good work. They've got a lot of accommodation for young people in and around this city, which are helping young people through difficult times. And I think that is very important. That helps the council, it helps young people, so they want to actually do things. And I'm pleased that the facilities will improve. They are, as you said, Councillor, very much dated, and it would be nice to have a nice hot shower from time to time in there, however they're going to do that. So, Mike, is there anything further you would like to say?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of consultation, I suppose, and public access safeguards, I'll just comment that I've had from James Berg, the service lead for active and healthy people. He says, and I'll quote this verbatim, effectively, a wide-ranging, fully open public consultation on the plans and the future of KTV will take place in late summer/early autumn, in line with the ECC consultation charter. Residents, local community groups and interested parties will be able to fully engage in the process with local events, surveys and informal opportunities to speak with ECCT and ECC representatives. The site will remain fully accessible to the general public, with all improvements focused at improving sport, community health and well-being provision. I'll go on to say, I mean, we don't need to enter into a lease. We're not asking for authority to enter into a lease. We're asking for authority to enter into an agreement for lease. The details of the lease will be worked out under that agreement for lease process, and we won't enter into the lease itself until the conditions of that agreement for lease, which will include commitments to public open space, public access, and include responses to public consultation issues will be worked through before any lease is actually granted. With regard to the commitment to increase biodiversity, leases aren't necessarily the best mechanism for dealing with that, but there will also be a need. Often many of these investments will also need planning permission. I suspect that the planning process will work through those issues in greater detail than a property transaction would. I think that was about it.
Okay.
Fantastic, similarly.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mike. I've got the recommendation there. Can I have a second for it, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Okay, we're going to go into part two. I'm going to take 2 minutes while we shut everything down on that, and then we'll go into part two. Yeah, I'm going to move that. We're moving to part two. Do I have a second there? All those in favour?
See you later. Carried, Chair. Thank you.
Just give us a couple of minutes.